Good morning.
Can you hear me? It's on. Okay, I'll just get closer. It's the first of the month again, so first I want to do birthdays, December birthdays, wishing birthday Noelle Evans, Bella Fauch, Patrick and Patricia Chirella, Carol Kutak, and Kristen Schumacher. I'm sorry. Anybody else that I don't know about? That's it? Okay. I have a few announcements. The first one this afternoon at 3 p.m., Hobart Community Band concert at the Hobart Middle School, and it's free. Masks are required. See Dick for more information. Okay. If you want to donate any money to our family giving this year, or maybe Aldi cars or something, please see Michelle. Her daughter is finishing up shopping for everybody today, so the money could be donated to pay that, to go back into the fund. On December 26th, I'm doing a service, The Joy of Animals. So starting now until the 20th, I would hope that everybody could send pictures of their animal with the animal's name and your name, your pet, or animals that you see all the time that you've taken pictures of in your yard or when you're out. And with your name, and send it to James. And I have on the bulletin board out front his email address to send them to. The more, the better. Okay. Hi. Good morning and welcome to the worship service of the First Unitarian Church of Hobart. My name is Barb Lango, and I participate in the life of the church by serving on the board of directors. We are a religious community of people with diverse beliefs and shared values. Our diverse beliefs are expressed in our 6 sources, and our shared values are expressed in our 7 principles, both of which can be found online at uua.org. Together, we strive to grow spiritually, build community, and live our lives in the world. We are currently in search for a full-time minister. When we do not have a minister in the pulpit, we invite members or guests to share a special message with us. This is one such Sunday. We are really fortunate today to hear from Reverend Keith Kron. He's the director of the Transitions Office for the UUA, helping congregants and ministers as they navigate the ministerial search process. He held office of Director of Office of Bisexual, Gay, Lesbian, and Transgender Concerns for the Unitarian Universalist Association. We are currently streaming our service online. The joys and sorrows portion of our service is, however, private, and we will take a break from streaming during that part of the service. The YouTube and the church website. Let your Facebook and Twitter friends know that you are attending service with hashtag First Unitarian Hobart. Due due to the increase in COVID-19 cases and the more infectious Delta variant, we ask that all in-person attendees of the Sunday services wear a mask covering both mouth and nose. You can either bring a mask or we will provide one. We thank you for your consideration of our community's health and safety. Please take a deep breath now and join us in the spirit of reverence.
Please join me in reciting the words for lighting the chalice of printed in your order of service. We gather this hour as people of faith with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together. Please join in singing the opening hymn, number 159, Rise as You Are Willing and Able. Standing and recite with me the affirmation of faith. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament. Service is its prayer. And this is our covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. This is the time during our service when we greet our neighbor. And yes, let me read the words we have here. We are striving to create a worship space which is both spiritual and safe. However, we recognize that not everyone can attend in person. We extend a special welcome to everyone who is joining us virtually today. Thank you to our tech team for making the live streaming and recording possible. Due to the increase in COVID-19 cases and the more infectious Delta variant, as well as Omicron, the Greet Your Neighborhood portion of our service will be contactless. Please take a moment to greet your neighbor by waving your hands and letting your smile reach past your mask to your eyes. Good morning, everybody. This is the time during our service when we share with each other our joys and sorrows. This congregation expresses our greatest joys and deepest sorrows in community. We believe that a joy shared is magnified and a sorrow shared is diminished. We pause, listening to what arises from within our hearts. Your joys and sorrows will not be streamed online, nor will they be part of the recording which is made public. Due to COVID, we will not be passing the microphone. Please speak loudly when you share your joys and concerns. If you cannot hear a speaker, please raise your hand and I will paraphrase. Pleasure and joy to introduce our speaker today. Some of us have spent part of our weekend with him. His name is Reverend Keith Kron, and as Barb pointed out, he's director of the Transitions Office for the UA. He's been working with our search committee in helping us on our path to finding a new minister. So he is going to be delivering the sermon today, and let's give him a warm welcome. Thank you.
It is so good to be with you. I wish I could be there with you in person. Hopefully the world will change enough so that will be possible sooner rather than later. I'm sharing with you a story for the child in all of us. The star of the story is our friend Penelope, a little Tyrannosaurus Rex. The title of the story is We Don't Eat Our Classmates. It's by the author Ryan Higgins, and it's about Penelope. to those new friends we might make. Even before the tragic events in Michigan this week, the ideas around violence and harm have been a lot on my mind. Michigan just made that more clear, more into focus. And I've been spending a lot of time thinking about church and violence, religion and violence. And I remembered it was just over 3 years ago that a man walked into a synagogue in Pittsburgh and opened fire, killing too many congregants. But it was just another couple of months before that there was a revelation about the sex scandal within the Roman Catholic Church, within the Diocese of Pittsburgh. And those two events have really caused me to think about, why does anyone trust religion at all? What is its purpose? But I'm reminded of writer and Unitarian Universalist minister, the Reverend Robert Fulgham, who says, to be human is to be religious. To be religious is to be mindful. To be mindful is to pay attention. And to pay attention is to sanctify existence. And I believe that we live with all of these religious questions, and certainly you are living with these religious questions in the midst of a ministerial search. This has made me think about trainings that I do for ministers. And I asked ministers recently on 2 different workshops to create a list. What do you think a congregation needs from a minister these days? They wrote the things that you would expect. They said good preaching, pastoral counseling, someone to make sure that there is someone to supervise staff. But what really intrigued me was what they didn't say. No one said, we need a minister with whom we can build trust. We need a minister who will actively work to do no harm. And that made me think, I don't think in 12 years of being in this job, I've ever heard a search committee, they say that needed from. Those 2 things needed from a minister. And yet I think both are essential to ministry. And perhaps we assume that they are just simply unsaid, but I think we are at a moment where we need to consciously say them, to talk to them, that this could be a way to begin to rebuild trust in religion. How do we show up in the wider world? How do we show that we believe in one another and humanity? Was thinking also about violence because it was just 23 years ago when I showed up in Laramie, Wyoming, following the tragic death of Matthew Shepard. Was only one of 2 religious denominations to show up to support the religious people in Wyoming after this particular event. I had been asked by the local minister in Laramie to show up, to say a few words to the congregation, to join them as they went out to the fence where Matthew had been left to die and lay some flowers. I thought it was a very important thing to do. So I showed up in Wyoming, attended the church that morning. The minister at the time, a brand new minister who was very nervous, read a letter that someone had written to the congregation in support, turned to me and said, where I was expecting him to say, and now Reverend Kron will say a few words, instead said, and now Reverend Kron will deliver the morning sermon on Matthew Shepard's death. Stunned, surprised, I don't remember what I said. I do remember that I talked for a few minutes, and I remember that I talked about the need for religion to rise above and witness against this kind of violence. After the service, we went out to the fence where Matthew Shepard had been left to die. The minister and I laid some flowers next to the fence where Matthew had been tied up and left. And the minister turned to me and said, "And now Reverend Kron will lead the memorial service for Matthew Shepard." Again, I don't remember what I said, but I do remember that it was important just to be there and to be there with these people when unspeakable things happen. It is important that we witness to the world that we can be something different. Later, I asked the minister about why he had asked me to do a sermon when what he had told me was to say a few words, and why he said this. And he said, "I'm brand new. I have no idea what to do in these situations." And that I understood, because often in the name of unspeakable tragedies, we don't know what to do. But what we can do is show up for each other, to be present to each other, to just sit with each other, and to listen to each other as we try and make sense of a world that often doesn't make sense. This notion of building trust is so important. And I think about the author and psychologist Brene Brown, who talks about how trust is truly built not in big moments, but in little moments. The little things that we do for each other. Things like showing up, even when we don't know what to say. But that also made me think that if trust is built in little moments, it can also be broken in little moments. And I immediately thought back to seminary. I was in a class on death and dying, and the professor of the class, a woman named Anna Stern, who had survived the Holocaust as a child, who now worked with young people who were contemplating suicide, who was teaching the class, had us one day practice being chaplains for someone in a hospital who had experienced a serious accident, who simply couldn't move. Their life was in some peril. What would it be to show up when someone had almost no or little hope? So she had one student pretend to be the patient, and then she asked for a volunteer to go over and to pretend to be the chaplain and to practice what being a chaplain was like. So the young man who went over to be the chaplain sat down next to the patient in the bed and took the patient's hand. And just as he was about to speak, Anna stood up and said, "Please never do that again." And everyone turned and looked at Anna to try and figure out what on earth she was talking about. But then she imparted this wisdom. She said, "I want you all to think about this patient. This is a person who doesn't know what is going to happen to their life. They have no control over their body. You walked over to this person and took his hand without asking first. So what you have done is you have actually taken more control away from him. What would have happened if you had asked first? If you had given him permission to either nod yes or no, to give him some little control over his life in that moment." He said, violence like that happens in those little moments, when even when we think we're doing good things, we are in fact making someone more uncomfortable. It's more important that you just show up, that you just listen, that you ask for permission. It's a story that I have not forgotten and remind myself of on a daily basis since I was in ceremony, in seminary, and how important that is. Right before things closed down, I was at the UUA talking with a colleague of mine. He was visiting his son outside of Cleveland for his birthday. And for his birthday, my friend was taking his son, who was in his mid-20s, and two of his son's friends to a baseball game at Cleveland. And as they were going by, they drove by our congregation on the west side of Cleveland, West Shore UU congregation. And on the building, there was this huge rainbow flag, this huge sign that said, Black Lives Matter. And immediately the three 20-year-olds began talking, and they began saying things like, well, if I were to go to church, that is the church I would want to go to. This is a church that's trying to make the world better. This is a church that is trying to make a difference in people's lives. And I was impressed with that story, and it made me wonder, what would happen if they really did show up in this church, wanting to make a difference in the world, wanting to be a part of making a difference in the world? I'm sure as 25-year-olds, they would be told, you are welcome here. But what sort of little stipulations would we put on them? You are welcome here as long as you act like all the people who are 60 and over here. You are welcome here as long as you serve on 3 committees like the rest of us. You are welcome here as long as you give at the same rate as the people do. In what ways would we expect those 25-year-old guests to be like the people who are already there? Could we let them be who they are as 25-year-olds, living a very different life than the folks who are older? We often do the same thing for people of color, for Black, Indigenous people of color who show up in our congregations. You are welcome here as long as you act exactly like us, as long as you think like us. How do we honor and create the diversity of thought that we actually claim to believe? How do we honor the inherent worth and dignity and journey of every person, of every seeker? How do we let people be them? There are times when we as Unitarian Universalists can be as fundamentalist as folks on the right. Sometimes we do eat our classmates instead of just listening to them and learning from them. This, I think, this pandemic has provided an opportunity for people to think about the world, what they want, who they want to be. Coming out of this pandemic into whatever the next normal is could be a golden age for Unitarian Universalism. Will we be able to reach out for those who need a faith like ours? One that actually says we welcome all people, regardless of race, gender, sexual orientation, ability, theology, age? Or will we be a group that just simply says we only want people exactly like us? Will we circle our own wagons? I have sometimes met congregations where I think what they really need is a hospice chaplain, because they are so unwilling to think about who could be a Unitarian Universalist other than if they are exactly like them. In the workshop this weekend, and thanks to those who were able to come, I shared a thought from the Nigerian author Chimamanda Adichie, who writes about stereotypes. And this is what she says. The single story creates stereotypes, and the problem with stereotypes is not that they are untrue, but that they are incomplete. They make one story the only story. I often think one of the great things about Unitarian Universalism is that we often say that we are all more than one story, and that more than one story can be with us on Sunday morning. And my question is, how do we live that? How do we build that trust? How do we know our harm? Do we allow ourselves to be more than a single story? Or will we commit the little acts of violence and say, you have to be like those of us who are in the room? And in these complicated times, how do we unclench? How do we do no harm? How do we pay attention, sanctify existence? How do we be religious? I still remember the story my friend and former dean of my seminary, Bob Kindle, told me once. He told me the story of being in a meeting with the other deans of the theological schools where I went. There were 7 schools in this area. And he and his friend, who were an American Baptist, were talking about something, and they disagreed with each other. They had completely different viewpoints. And he said, what fascinated me is that the other deans were trying to make it better. They were trying to find some way to get them to be in agreement with each other. And finally, Bob said, I want you to know that Jeff and I are friends. We disagree on this issue. We will be friends after this meeting is over. What is more important to me is that I hear what you believe so that we as a group can make the best decision for all of our schools. How can we be more than one story and disagree with each other? How do we not run from a diversity that will in fact strengthen us? This is, I think, the challenge of our times, the challenge of religion. This pandemic has changed all of us in some ways. I think the opportunity is, what kind of person do we want to be with one another, even with people who are different? I have a final story that I want to close with. This is from 25 years ago. I had just started at the UUA as the director of its Office of Bisexual, Gay, Lesbian, and Transgender Concerns, and I had gone to a conference with other religious leaders. And on the first day, we were all seated, and remember, this is the late 90s, at this huge table. We were passing microphones back and forth, and seated next to me is John from the Church of Christ, and on the other side of me is Mark from the Church of God. And John gets to the microphone and he says, hi, my name is John. I'm here today representing the Church of Christ, and I am to the right of the right. He smiles and he hands the microphone to me. And I go, hello, my name is the Reverend Keith Kron. I'm the director of the Office of Bisexual, Gay, Lesbian, and Transgender Concerns for the Unitarian Universalist Association. And by the time I got to that point, I had to stop talking because the noise that John and Mark were making from scooting their chairs away from me kept me from being heard. And when they finally stopped, I said, and we are to the left of the left. It was a conference on religion, gender, and sexuality. We spent 4 days talking about all of these topics. People were amazed even then that we had more women than men in ministry, that we actively supported the rights of gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender people, that we had comprehensive sexuality education that we thought was important for people of all ages to participate in. On the 4th day, John and Mark and 2 of their friends, probably named Matthew and Luke, though I don't remember now, came up to me and they said, we would like to have lunch with you. And I thought, oh, all right, this is going to be fun. I had grown up a Southern Baptist in Tennessee. All 4 of these folks were from Tennessee. I knew how to talk to these people. And they were my teachers that day, because we sat down at lunch and began talking about a few things. And finally, Mark said, you know, we just wanted you to know, the 4 of us have been talking. We have listened to you for the last 4 days. And we wanted you to know that we have disagreed with literally everything you have said. But we also wanted you to know that we respect you, because at least you are clear about what you believe. We are frustrated with the people who are trying to find some way for us all to be together, because we're not going to be together. And in some ways, it's easier to be with you than for the people who can't make up their minds. It was a profound moment for me in thinking about that. Eventually, we returned to somewhat safer topics like football, because we were all from Tennessee, all big fans of football. They were surprised that I liked football, and they were even more surprised that I knew more about football than all four of them. So I got a chance to be their teacher that day as well. We all got a chance to be together, to be more than a single story with each other, and to benefit from that diversity. This is my hope for our faith. This is my hope for our future, that we will embrace the diversity we have, welcome more of it, and use it as a way to find to strengthen our faith and our religion for a world that really needs it. We don't have to be good at it, as we did yesterday in the workshop. We just spent some time practicing. How do we have complicated and difficult conversations? We just have to commit being people who are willing to sit with each other, to listen to each other, and to let people be where they are, whatever space they are in. This is my hope for our faith, for Unitarian Universalism, that we can be a faith that commits to building trust, to doing no harm, to sanctifying existence, and to be religious together in all the wonderful ways that we can be. So may it be.
It's time for our offering. Now is the time in our service for our offering. We give to remind ourselves how many gifts we have to offer. We give to remember that we are part of something bigger than ourselves. We give because we believe in music and sacred space. We give with the faith that together we have enough. There's an online link on the screen for both one-time and regular donations. You can also contribute in person by putting paper money and loose change in these baskets and cups. The money in the baskets goes to sustaining the mission of our community. The money in the cups goes to our Faith and Action Committee and a different charity chosen by the committee every month. Please try not to touch the baskets and cups as our ushers bring them to you. And I ask for 2 volunteers, and I see we've got 2 of them.
This month, the loose change, total change goes to the minister's discretionary fund, who come in to the church meeting.
service and your gifts. We are truly grateful.
Thank you, Jeff. Will you please join in singing the closing hymn, number 1017? We are building a new way. Stand as you are willing and able.
We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. Hate and love and jealousy. We are working to be free. Peace and freedom, every need. We can feed our every need. We can feed our every need. Peace and freedom is a cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry.
Thank you, Jeremy. We could not have done that without you. These are some extemporaneous closing words. I just wanted to thank Reverend Kron for his wonderful sermon, and I wanted to thank everybody who participated in the survey and the workshops over the weekend. We learned a lot about each other and about ourselves. Hopefully we'll continue to do that as we move forward into the future. So thank you, everyone.
I may speak with bravest fire and have the gift to all inspire, but have not love. My words are vain as sounding brass and hopeless gain. I may speak bravest fire. I may speak, bravest fire.
Please join me in reciting the words for extinguishing the chalice, printed in your order of service. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.